It turns out that the question of whether the universe is real or imaginary is a halachic Torah issue. And that's the only difference. The only reason the question is relevant at all is because the Torah says that you're not allowed to create illusions. Magic, but if everything is an illusion, you're not allowed to add to the illusion. Now, another thing we need to preface. There's a difference between illusion and incorrect. I can say 2 and 2 is 5. Is that an illusion? No, it's just wrong. It's not like I imagine that 2 and 2 is 5. No, I added it up and it came out 5, so I must be doing something wrong. So if I have a wrong opinion, that's not the same as an illusion. Then there's also the effect of the mind on your emotions, on your body, on your perception of the world. The role that the brain plays in our understanding of the world. That's also not an illusion in the strict sense of the word. So, for example, I'm frightened because I think there's a boogeyman under the bed. So I break out in a sweat and I get very nervous and I'm trembling. That's an illusion? There's an illusion that there's a boogeyman under the bed, but the physical symptoms are not an illusion. The mind does that to the body. When the mind says there is something to be afraid of, the body reacts with terror, right? So, for example, and he uses the example here in the text, the placebo effect. I give you a pill, it's nothing but sugar, and you feel better. See, it's an illusion. No, it's not an illusion. You feel better. It's not an illusion that you feel better. The illusion is that you think I gave you medicine. I didn't. I just gave you sugar, which is better than medicine. So why do you feel better? Because your brain is saying, okay, now we're better. So the body calms down and feels better. But that's the psychosomatic effect. It's not an illusion. In fact, if we could heal ourselves strictly by placebo, we would be the healthiest people in the world. So if you can convince yourself that you're healthy, you will be healthy. Not an illusion. The trick is, I gave you what seems to be medicine, and that convinced you that you're getting better. There's a story that's supposed to describe silliness and immaturity. Some guy walks out of a shtetl and he's laughing hysterically, and they say, "What's so funny?" He says, "I had the whole town fooled. I fooled them all. I had them all." "Yeah, what did you do?" "I told them my name is Yankel." "It's not. It's not." He had them all fooled. So he created an illusion for all of them. It's not an illusion, it was just wrong information. So the word illusion needs to be understood more precisely. Okay, let's see. If we really want to know whether the world is real versus imaginary or illusionary, the place to look for an answer, of course, is Chassidus. There are answers in philosophy, in Jewish philosophy. But those answers are philosophical, which means it still leaves room for debate. Whereas when Hasidus gives an answer, it's an answer. It's conclusive. What do we know about the world? So the first thing we know about the world is Bereshis Bora Elikim. Here you have that text. I think you might know it by heart. Bereshis Bora Elikim es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz. If you want to know whether the world is real, the Torah says, in the beginning the Eibishter created the world. So if Torah says, then it's real. So the Torah is saying that the Eibishter created a world. So he created something. The question is what? Did he create an illusion? That would be a creation. Who is having this illusion? Maybe the whole world is an illusion. What? Whose illusion? Yours? You are having an illusion? So, are you real? Or are you just an imaginary creature imagining that it's having an imagination? It's becoming ridiculous. So even if you perceive the world as an illusion, you are real. Because you're the perceiver, not the perception. And you are real but cannot see reality. This is so tortured thinking, you know. So when the Torah says, Bereshis Bora Elikim, it means that he created a heaven and an earth, not the illusion of a heaven and an earth. However, there are so many places in Torah, and particularly Hasidus, where we are told the opposite. Ata harei saladas ki Hashem hu helikim ein eid milvade. It is such an important concept in Torah, and particularly in Hasidus, that there is nothing besides Hashem. Meaning that the world is not real. So did the Eibishter create a world, a real world, or is the world not real? This is where we have a significant discussion. It's not that the world is imaginary. It's that there is no world. That's very different. Because ein oid means there is nothing else, not even an illusion. Because the whole point is that the Eibishter is the only. Well, if there's an illusion, well, that's not him. So there is something besides him. So if the Eibishter created a world that is an illusion, then yesh oid, not ein oid. Okay. Now he goes into a discussion of what is the difference between reality and perception. What would be a good example of an illusion versus reality?
Fear of what would happen tomorrow.
That is not an illusion. No. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
It's really scary. Why is it an illusion? It's like
You don't know.
it's like you live in California and you're terrified of earthquakes. Well, yeah.
But you don't know
That's
what
not-
happens tomorrow.
No, okay. If you have the illusion that there's going to be an earthquake tomorrow,
Yeah.
that would be an illusion.
Right.
But if you're worried that there might be,
Okay.
You're right.
Okay, fine. So the illusion that there will be one, and now I can't live today because
Okay.
imagining that there's going to be an earthquake tomorrow.
Okay. And what would be the reality in contrast to that illusion? That there's not going to be an earthquake tomorrow?
No, that I'm here today. And
Okay, so today is more real than tomorrow.
yeah,
So any projection would be an illusion.
yeah.
Any prophecy would be an illusion. I guess.
I guess.
Another imagining that you're famous if you're not, for example.
If what?
Like imagining that you're famous and actually you're not famous at all. Like that's like having a completely confused perception of, like dreaming that you live in Hollywood when you actually live in Crown Heights. Like
There's a difference.
So if you're a legend in your own mind,
right, because your kids know who you are, so you think you're a star. Example of an illusion.
I have an interesting question. Where does illusion come from? What creates illusion? Okay, there are, of course, illusions, even if the world is real. What is an illusion, and where does it come from? And why do we do that? Why do we have illusions? Entertainment?
Memories in our mind.
Uh-huh.
The memory in our mind.
A bad memory
Or good memory.
or a good memory?
Wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking, meaning?
We want to change what we perceive, so we create something that makes, if I can use the word, sense to us or helps us through the day, whatever that might be.
That makes a lot of sense. If I imagine that I'm safe because I can't stand being insecure, makes perfect sense. It's my survival instinct. But what about the opposite? Well, everything is secure, and you're in under the illusion that everything is not secure, and you're cracking up about it. Why would you do that to yourself? If you do it to yourself.
Well, then it can fix our world. If we were able to, if we can imagine, if we have this imagination that everything is going wrong, then now I have an
All right.
opportunity to fix it.
Okay, so now
Which do we think that we can
tell me,
fix?
what is the difference between imagination and illusion?
Reality and non-reality.
Meaning?
Wait, imagination? and illusion. Same thing.
Illusion has a feeling of falseness to it.
And imagination?
In imagination, it's accepted, like it's thought of in a positive way. An imagination, you have a good imagination.
Yeah.
But if you say you have a good illusion, you wouldn't say that.
Then you can make the best movies. I think the difference might be imagination means I know I'm imagining. Illusion means I don't know that I'm illuding. Was there such a word like that? I'm illusioning. In other words, in imagination, you know it's imagination. When you're under an illusion, you think it's real. Yeah. So there's this classical, which maybe would be relevant a little further on. There's a guy in Russia, in the bad days, he wanted to get out. He was desperate to get out of Russia. And there was no way. Until he hit on a plan. There's a train that goes from Moscow to Switzerland. And it has a refrigerated car, which once they close, they don't open until it arrives in Switzerland, because they don't want to warm up the car. So once they lock it, in Moscow, they don't open it until all the other cars get inspected. So he decided that he is going to smuggle himself into the refrigerated car, the freezer car, and get out of Russia. He was a scientist, so he calculated how long can a person survive in a sealed car, because there's no air. His calculations told him that he could just about make it. It'll be difficult. He might die, but then again, he might make it, and it's worth the risk. Anyway, he smuggled himself into the car, and when they arrived in Switzerland, they opened the car. He was dead. But they saw on the wall of the car where he kept a record of his condition, like short of breath, hard to breathe, can hardly breathe. By the hour, he checked it off. And then by the time they got there, he was dead. The really strange thing was that he went into the wrong car. It was not sealed.
Was not what?
The car was not sealed.
He had air.
There was air.
There was air, but it wasn't enough.
Nope.
No, his mind.
It was all in the mind.
All in his mind.
How long was he in the car?
12 hours. I don't know.
This isn't a true story.
Yeah.
Oh.
So his brain killed him.
Not an illusion.
Right? Is that an illusion?
No, it's reality.
No, he had an
Illusion
illusion.
causes reality. Change is reality.
He was also
Reality can be
imagining.
changed by
By
an illusion.
illusion, yeah.
Right.
I don't know if we could call it an illusion. It was a miscalculation. Given the assumption that the car is sealed, so it wasn't sealed. So it's simply a mistake, not an illusion. So if somebody, oh, I thought I locked the door. I didn't? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you had an illusion that you locked the door? No, you thought you did and you didn't. So illusion has to have some element of fantasy or disconnected from reality. But a mistake in reality is not an illusion, is it? You're imagining things? No, you miscalculated.
But then he starts to imagine, based on his miscalculation,
No,
based on his illusion that the
right.
door is
Based
sealed.
on his calculation, he followed the logic and died, because he logically should die. So again, it's a psychosomatic effect. But the brain is not imaginary. The brain is real. And it has a real effect on your body. That's why misinformation is more dangerous than illusion. Can be more dangerous. So not knowing the reality is more dangerous than having a good imagination. Because, like you said, why do we have illusions? To protect ourselves from the harshness or the difficulties of life. But if you have misinformation, you're not protected. You're not protecting. You're just in trouble because somebody gave you bad information. So it's interesting. What does the Torah say about illusion? You're not allowed to mislead a person, right? Lifnei iver le'sitin michshol. If somebody asks you which way on the road, or which in the fork of the road, which road leads to Rome, and you give them the wrong one, that's illusion. But it's not allowed, which means the world is not an illusion, because if it was an illusion, then what's the difference? Which way? I misled you. No, I didn't. It's all an illusion.
Both wrong.
So if misleading a person is a sin, it means that there is a reality and you misled. But if it's all illusion, so what's the difference? You're not allowed to lie. What do you mean? The whole thing's a lie. There's nothing true. So what do you mean you can't lie? Our whole existence is a lie, so it's another lie. Okay, so
Could you repeat that one more time? That, what you just said?
about misleading,
Yeah.
if it's a sin, lifnei iver lesitin michshel, or gnevas das, when you give wrong information, it's gnevas das, and it's a sin. But why would it be a sin if everything is an illusion anyway? So you distorted the truth? There is no truth. It's all an imagination. So you see, there is a truth, and if you deny it or misinform, leading people away from the truth, that's a sin.
Intentionally, but what if you
Yeah.
yourself tell somebody something and
Right.
believing that it's right, but it's not?
So what if in your illusion you give the wrong information? What makes it wrong? Another thing. If the world is an illusion, then our morality is also an illusion. Right and wrong? How could you do that? Do what? It's all an illusion. So if the world was an illusion, we wouldn't have the right to be morally upset or moral indignation. What happened? You had the wrong illusion. You're supposed to have that illusion. You're supposed to have this illusion. There would be no morality, right? Or we wouldn't be able to take it seriously. So we would have an illusion of morality. That's getting crazy. Nonsense. All right. So what is our definition of reality?
1 second. Did you explain what it means, Eino Novata? Did you explain that? Because I didn't understand. It doesn't mean that there is nothing but Hashem. So what does it mean?
Huh?
What does it mean when it says Eino? There's nothing.
That the world does not really exist.
Did you go on to explain that?
I didn't yet. But it's a good idea to explain it. Hasidus explains that, what does it mean created? God created the world. What does create mean? We can do this with every word in the dictionary. What does create mean?
No, but it also says Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Elam.
Right.
Just spoke.
Right. That's the conflict. Create means cause to exist. An artist creates a work of art. That's not bara. In fact, there's a text for it. Let's take a look. I skipped a little puzzle there with the shadows. It's text 7. You have that? Page 14? Yeah. Yeah, text 7. He's quoting from the Ramban. HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara kol hanevroim me'afisa muchletes. The Eibishter created the world from absolute nothingness. Ve'ein etzleinu b'loshon hakodesh be'hitzoas hayesh me'ayin elo loshon bara. We have no other way to describe creation than to say bara, which means something from nothing. So when you say Bereshis bara, God created, you have to add, as if it's a commentary, created something from nothing. But really the word bara means something from nothing. So what does bara mean? Caused to exist. Because before he caused it to exist, it didn't exist. It's almost like, what did God create? Vayemer Elokim yehi oir vayehi oir. God created light. That's not the real meaning of create. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ves haaretz, v'haaretz haysa tohu, and the earth was dark. The earth? Which earth? When did Hashem say, let there be an earth? Or water? V'ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim. Where did David say, let there be water? He said, let the water separate. But where did he say, let there be water? So before the Eibishter said, Yehi Oir, there was already earth, there was darkness, there was water. When were those things created? So the Medrash says the word Bereshis is an instruction for earth and water and air and darkness to exist. So the real creation was before the Eibishter said Yehi Oir. So what is Yehi Oir? Illuminate what is. So you're already dealing with what is. So what's illuminate? Turn on the light. You have a room, it's dark, you turn on the light. It's not coming out of nowhere. Let the earth give forth vegetation. Let the water separate. You see, you're already dealing with what is. The real bara is shamayim va'aretz, not the details. The first day after creation, the Eibishter said, let there be light. The second day after creation, maybe that's why it says Bereshis. In the beginning, not the beginning. The beginning was Shamayim va'aretz. And that came out of nowhere.
At least in the beginning it was earth, water, darkness. That was the very beginning.
And heaven.
So,
And that's what Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es ha'aretz. That's it. The world is now created. Now, on the first day after that, the Eibishter said, Yehi Oir. And on the second day, he separated the waters. And on the third day, he made things grow.
so when was the Ruach Elokim Rachafes? When was that? On day one?
Before day one.
All because the Medrash says, huh? The Medrash says.
Now, let's understand another thing. What does it mean? He says here, afisa muchletes. Absolute nothingness. If I say nothing, do I have to add absolute? Is nothing not nothing? What part of nothing don't you understand? There was nothing. I mean, nothing. Okay, I got it. Nothing. No? So when the Torah puts an emphasis on something, it's not just to be dramatic. There was like absolutely no. Torah doesn't do that. There was nothing. That's true enough, and you don't have to embellish. So when it says absolute nothing, it's telling you something in addition, right? So there is, for example, a chicken has never laid an egg. Never. There are no eggs. No egg exists. Yeah, but there's a chicken. What is a chicken? A chicken is a bird that lays eggs. there is no egg. But if there's a chicken, then in a sense there is an egg. Just like if there's an egg, you know there's a chicken. If there's a chicken, you know there's an egg. He hasn't laid the egg yet. But the egg already exists in potential. It just hasn't happened in the physical. So you can't say, there's no such thing as eggs, there's only a chicken. If there's a chicken, there's an egg. In the same way, you can't say there is no world. Nothing was created. There is a creator, right? You say, Ein Eid Milvade, there's only him. And him is a creator. If there's a creator, then there's a creation. It hasn't happened yet? Okay, so it hasn't happened yet, but there is a creation. But the creation has not yet presented itself. So it exists in potential. So it's not nothing. Potential is a serious issue. So if something exists only in potential, it's real, it exists. But there is no world yet. And even if no world will ever be, if there is a creator, there's a creation in him. It's like, people say about writers. The writer says, I have a book in me, I just haven't written it yet. And it's true, right? A composer, he's got a song in him, but otherwise he's not a composer. So if you say he's a composer, there's got to be a composition somewhere. If you're a writer, there's got to be a book there somewhere. That's why the secret is the Eibishter is not a creator. That is so important. When you say Ein Eid Milvadei, you're saying he is not a creator with a creation waiting to pop out. He's not a creator. He is the Eibishter. To create, it's beneath his dignity. He's not a carpenter. So you can't say the Eibishter is a creator who needs to get the creation out. Like he's carrying around an egg and it's got to be laid. No. There is no world in him waiting to come out. On the contrary, since he is so infinite, there can't be a finite world in him somewhere.
So, you go to like the Museum of Natural History, for example, and they say this rock is 10 million years old. So it's possible that maybe the world really is that old. If it was created even before Bereshit, you were saying it was already created.
It wouldn't help much because they're saying they find bones that are that old. So
I'm talking about the rocks. I mean, they can actually count the layers of rocks and trees and that type
Yeah.
of thing. I mean, you're saying that it's possible that really the world was already created that long ago. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to
Yeah.
actually measure it, but
yeah, it's a little bit off the subject, but time was also created. So when did that happen? So yes, it could be that the rocks are billions of years old, but it only took a minute. They're aged.
It could have been created already.
Yeah.
10 million years old.
Yeah. Billions of years is not its age, it's the state of its agedness. But that could happen in a minute. So, when we say Ein Eid Milvadei, and we say Bereshis Bara Elikim, it's really saying the same thing. Bara means out of nowhere. Out of nowhere means there was no potential world waiting to be created. Because if it did exist in potential, then it's not out of nowhere. It went from potential to actual. That's not out of nowhere. So when we say God created the world out of nothing, yesh me ayin, ayin means absolute nothing. It's not just that it hasn't happened yet. There's no reason for it to happen. It doesn't already exist in potential. There is nothing. Question is, once God does create the world, did that change anything, or is it still nothing?
I thought you said that if there's a creator, there's a creator.
Huh?
I thought you said if there was a creator, there's a creator.
Right. That's why it's important to know that the Eibishter is not a creator. You can say he is the creator, because he created the world. But he is a creator? No. To create is uncharacteristic of him.
So Hashem created the potential for the world to be created by us.
Right. He created the world in stages. First he created the potential out of
Nothing.
right, and then from the potential he put it together.
So it's better to say cause to exist than create.
Exactly. Because create could mean forming, shaping, putting together that which already exists. Whereas when you say caused to exist means it did not exist. So let me give you the punchline before we go through the whole thing. God is not a creator, and the world did not exist in potential. But then he creates the world. Now you can look at that two ways. One is, there was no potential, the world had no reason to exist, it only exists because he decided to create it, and therefore it is nothing. It's a whim on God's part. But to say that the world is real, of course not real. It's nothing. It started off nothing, it remains nothing. And you even have the explanation that if you cause something that doesn't exist to exist, can it now exist on its own? The answer is no, because what do you mean it?
Yeah, but what if what if you create a child, which came from nothing, then became a person,
It came from something.
and then they can exist on their own?
No.
It didn't come from nothing.
Well, once it was never there, except in our illusion.
Okay.
No. It's not an illusion. It's for real. So if there's a mother, then there's a child.
Potential, if it has
Yeah.
conceived you,
But potential is real.
but it might not ever happen.
That's right. So it will remain in potential. So it will continue to exist as a potential. So what is the argument? If you create something from nothing, can it? What's it? There's no it. There's just the creator causing. But it is nothing. It was nothing. It remains nothing. So when you say God caused it to exist, it means it doesn't have an existence. Yeah, but maybe God gave it, and gave what? You see what I'm saying?
Well, isn't it really more that God is causing himself to exist?
In other words, there's nothing besides him.
Right.
So that's the argument that the world is not. Because if it wasn't to begin with, then there is no it. Say, but God gave it. God made it able. Made what able? If you take a stone and you chip at it until you make a form and you turn it into a little statue, okay, it is now a statue.
So God has to be in the world in order for it to exist.
Yeah. Point is?
We're only here because God's in this world. And
Okay. So on the one hand, when you say God created the world out of nothing, it means that the world will always be nothing. On the other hand, There was nothing. Nothing. And God created the world? Isn't that something? Isn't that something? So, of course, the world is not of its own reality. But look how real it is if out of nothing God decides to create it. So what should we emphasize? How invested God is in the world, or how meaningless the world is? So again, the fact that God creates the world out of nothing means that the world is really something, or it's nothing. Both. Both. The world on its own is absolutely nothing. But when God creates it, it becomes absolutely something. It becomes God's ultimate purpose. You know what that means? So it gives the world so much more substance, the fact that it came out of nothing. No?
Well, I guess the biggest illusion people think they have today is that God exists at all. That's what the whole world is arguing,
That's like philosophy 101.
But that's, yeah, okay. And it's
There's-
not necessary to discuss, but that's,
Yeah.
the,
So just
that's
very
the illusion that everybody's
okay, very briefly.
has to face every day.
There's a creation, so there's a creator. You can't get around that. If there's a creation, there's a creator. Your only option, your only choice is to describe what the creator might be like. But no creator is insane. It's just ignorant. So what does science say? There was this particle that contained everything within it. And it exploded, and all the potential from that particle came out and created a world. That's not a creator? That's your creator. And the entire scientific world is looking for that creator, and they can't find him. But they're looking for the creator. All we're saying is, we found him. We met him thousands of years ago. No, not that creator. All right, don't be so picky. So really, the question is not whether there's a creator. The question is whether the creator knows what he's doing, or the creator is just a thing that plots. But we're both talking about a creator. That's not even the issue. Okay, let's get to the real. There's a little piece here from text 8 from Samson Raphael Hirsch. I'm not sure we need a quote for this. But basically what he's saying is, Yitzchak was born miraculously. Why? Because the point is that the entire existence of Jewish people is above nature, is beyond nature. So we can survive anything because our whole existence is supernatural. So no matter what nature does or throws at us, we're going to survive because we were never subjected to the restrictions of nature in the first place. We were born miraculous. So here's the point that this course is making. You have on page 16, you have figure 1.5b. There are four models of reality. The first is worldly reality, and that is the world is not an illusion. Simply said, if you try to walk through a wall, you're going to get hurt. So, but I imagine there's no wall. Too bad. You're going to end up in the hospital. Say, but I imagine there was no wall. You can imagine all you want, but a wall is a wall, and you walked into it. In fact, this is really interesting. If you really imagine that there was a wall when there wasn't, and you walked into it, would you get bruised?
Real bruise?
Yes.
Or in illusionary?
Real bruise.
I really died.
The guy really died. If you could really convince yourself there's a wall there and you walk into it, you better get bruised. Otherwise, it'll shatter your illusion. So the first model is there are laws of nature and you can't escape. You throw a stone into the air, it's going to fall back to earth, despite all your imaginations. That's the first model. Of course, the problem with that we already spoke about. That means that there can be no morality. Things are what they are, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's not really acceptable. What's the second possibility? The second possibility is creation reality. The world is real because God created it. Bereshis bara Elikim. So religiously, or from a Torah perspective, the world is real because the Eibishter created it. He created it real. Then there's the third reality, and that is a godly reality. That if God created it, then its existence is godly. Let's see what that means. So we read the Bereshis bara, that he created something from nothing. Why do we refer to the Eibishter as nothing? It's a little insulting, isn't it? Obviously, the meaning is the Eibishter created the world with nothing to work with. He had no raw materials. So he created the world from scratch. We're not referring to him as nothing. We're just saying he was working with nothing. But if you read the words literally, the world is not he created the world from nothing. The world is a something that came from nothing. But it came from him. Or in different words, it came from nothing but him. So why are you calling it nothing? So the answer, the conventional answer is, we're describing him as nothing, meaning nothing we can identify. He's not a thing. So he's a non-thing. Not that he's nothing. We're not dismissing him as non-existent. We're saying his existence is not like a thing. So it's something, the world is only a thing, but it comes from God who is not a thing. Like you can say, anything finite can be called something. Anything infinite can't be, if he's infinite, then what is he? Is he big or small? Infinite? He's not big, he's not small. So is he old or young? Infinite. So he's timeless, spaceless, and therefore not a thing. According to this, God's involvement in creating the world makes the world insignificant. Yes, he created the world, but he is the reality, not the world. Precisely because he is no thing, infinite. If he is infinite and the world is only finite, then what's the world? It's nothing to talk about. It's so insignificant, we might as well just talk about God. So yes, the world is real, but only because of him. And him is so overwhelming that the world disappears in his presence. So once we know that something about God, all of a sudden the world that he created becomes tiny and unimportant and insignificant. That's called a godly reality. So a good example would be the story in the Gemara where the girl lit Shabbos candles thinking that there was oil in the lamp, and it turned out that it was vinegar. So she was upset because vinegar doesn't burn. So her father said to her, Mi she'oma l'shemen v'yadlik, why do you think oil burns? Something about the oil? No. The Eibishter tells oil to burn. So today the Eibishter will tell the vinegar to burn.
And it did?
And it did, a whole Shabbos. Because, once you're doing miracles, it might as well last a whole day.
Same with the icicles in Russia.
The Baal Shem Tov. Break off an icicle and light it. Say, but that doesn't burn. What does burn? Whatever the Eibishter says to burn. So, in other words, the reality of the icicle is God. From that perspective, there's no such thing as a miracle. Because everything's a miracle. When you think oil burns, vinegar doesn't. A candle will burn, an icicle will not. Now you're seeing the world as a worldly reality, the laws of nature. But when you're thinking, what? So vinegar will burn, so the icicle will burn. Now you're seeing the world from a godly reality. It's all him. So why can't he make the vinegar burn?
And what would creation reality be?
Huh?
And what would creation reality be?
God said, let there be, so there is. But it is. Here we're saying it? It's nothing, it's all him. So let's follow the steps again. The first thing is the perception that there is a world and it's real. So real, you can't budge it. You have to follow the laws of nature because that's real. What it would mean in practical life? What do you mean keep Shabbos? My job, my work involves working on Shabbos, and that's how I make my money. So I mean, don't work on Shabbos. Can't. There was a time in the United States, if you didn't show up on Shabbos, you're fired. So you can't. The world says you can't. In fact, nature says that the Jewish people cannot survive. You're a tiny minority, everyone is out to get you, there's no way. You got 10 years, most. And yet, but by nature, by the rules of the world, you can't. So what do scientists or historians do? They have a wonderful theory that works. There is the rise and ebb of civilizations. It follows certain rules. Yeah, but what about the Jews? Don't mention Jews, because they don't follow the law. So the law is still a good law. Jews, okay, they're weird, but the law is a good law. Because you can't include Jews in your calculations because they don't follow the law. Right? Haman complained, the Jews don't follow laws. He meant the laws of nature. But by the law of nature, we should not exist. You can't. By the law of nature, Hasidus can't survive under Stalin. Can't. That's true. But it did. So then there's a second reality. The second reality is God created the world. And if he says don't work on Shabbos, then that's the reality. No? It's his world. Like the first Rashi that says, we stole the land of Israel. God gives it to whoever he wants. He takes it away and gives it to somebody else. So is it our land? It's our land. God gave it to us. So the second reality is the world is real because God created it. So how can it contradict God? So if God says, I created the world in order for people to keep Shabbos, how can the world say, no, you can't keep Shabbos? Not possible. So yes, you can keep Shabbos. Not miraculously, naturally. The third stage is, the world is real as God. Not it's a real world created by God. The world is a godly world. So how real is it? It's as real as God. Which then means there's nothing besides God. So what is the reality of the world? Its creator. So that's what he's calling a godly. And then there's the fourth stage. So let's go back to this Yesh Me'ayin. There are two perspectives according to Chassidus. Take a look at text 9. Now we're actually learning something. Here we go. And this is from the Tzemach Tzedek in Derech Mitzvosecha. V'ha'inyin, the matter is as follows. V'chsiv keil deyes Hashem. God is a God of opinions. Deyes, plural. Which means that God is comprises two opinions. Ha'alef, the first opinion is Hadeya shel l'maylo hu hayesh hu amiti. In the first perception, or the first opinion, is that he, Hashem, is the Yesh, and he created a world which is an Ayin.
What's a yesh and nine?
Something or nothing. So he is the something, and he created a world that is really nothing. V'chol masha limata kilo choshiv. And all that is below the Eibishter is really as nothing. Ki hu rak ha'ora ba'alma, it is merely a shine coming from Hashem, v'nikra ayin, and therefore should be called nothing. So what is something from nothing? No, nothing from something, because he is really something. And what he creates is just a creation, it's nothing. Mitzvah Tov Yud Zayin Perek Gimel, Beperish Ein Eid. etc. What does ein oid mean? So there are two expressions. In one place it says, ein oid milvadoi. There is nothing besides him. In another pasuk it says, ein oid, period. Ein oid milvadoi means there's no one like him. Ein oid means there's nothing. More than that, oid means also. Ein oid means there isn't even an also. It's not like, of course there's God and then there's also a world. No, there's no also, there's just him. So that's the perspective, the way God looks at the world. Habeis, the other perspective is, what does the world look like to us? Because we are part of the world. So what does the world look like to itself? Shenidme lahem, it appears to us, sheheim bechinas yesh v'davar. The creation, the created beings, that's substantial, that's real. V'eimrim shahabriya yesh me'ayin. And then we say that we, who are yesh, came me'ayin, came from nothing. V'reitza leimar, the meaning of it is, sheholakus hu bechinas ayin, that God is nothing, al shem she'enei musag. And we're calling him nothing because we don't understand him. V'hanivroyim hem bechinas yesh v'davar nira la'ayin. But the creation, that we know, we understand, and we can see. So that's real. But what we can't see is not real. Not that it doesn't exist. But it's ayin. It's something, but we don't know what. So there are two perspectives, right? You want to read the English here? The first mind is that God is the true reality, and all that is here below is regarded as nothing, as it is nothing but a reflection of God's reality. It is therefore called nothing, as was explained in an earlier discourse regarding the meaning of the verse, there is none. Shouldn't say else. This is God's mind. It is how it is from God's perspective. The second mind is how it appears from the perspective of the creation. To them it seems that they are real, they are something. They describe the creation of the world as something from nothing, meaning that godliness is nothing, as it is not graspable. And the creations are real and something because they are graspable. The summary is like this. From the perspective of the creation reality, we see the world as being created something from nothing. The world, which is definite and tangible, was brought into existence by an infinite and intangible God. Take a look at the story. Oh, you don't have the story. A mystic and a philosopher. We're talking. The mystic says to the philosopher, do you know the difference between you and me? A mystic and a philosopher. Right? You know the difference between you and me? You're always thinking about God, and I'm constantly thinking about myself. Let's change that a little bit. A chassid and a misnagid. We're talking. And the chassid said to the misnagid, you know the difference between me and you? You're always thinking about God, I'm always thinking about myself. That makes sense? The philosopher, misnagid, was flattered by the compliment. Then the mystic explained, the chassid explained, you are so certain about yourself and you take yourself for granted. I am, I'm real, I'm here, I need, I want, I did. So you end up wondering about God. Does he really exist? Does he really did? Did he really create? Is there really... So you're always thinking about God, wondering whether he's real. You don't have to think about yourself. You know you're real. As for me, the only real is God. So I walk around wondering about myself. Do I really exist? Am I necessary? What's the value of my existence here in the face of God's infinite perfection? Two perspectives. What do you take for granted, and what is news to you? From a worldly perspective, we take ourselves for granted. Hey, I know I'm real. What do I think about God? You see, God is my opinion. I have to think about him and say, I think there's a God. I can't be 100% sure. I mean, God is not like me. I'm real. He's that's like the classical question. The Torah says over and over and over, God has limbs. His right hand, his mouth, his eye, his head, his feet. They're all mentioned. His finger, his tongue, his nostrils. But come on, he doesn't have any of that. Right? God forbid to think that he has an arm. But the Torah says he has an arm. Don't take it literally. He has no arm. Then why does the Torah say he does have an arm? It's just a figure of speech. If you stop and think about that, what exactly is a figure of speech? God doesn't have an arm. The Torah says he has an arm. We're just, he's just saying what? If he doesn't have an arm, how does the Torah say he has an arm? What's the answer? Come on, you've heard an answer.
Like a metaphor.
He has the panemius of an arm.
It's a metaphor, which means nobody knows what a metaphor means. It's a good word.
The arm comes from him, so it's the armness of Hashem.
The Rambam says it's only a mashal. Huh? Metaphor is a mashal?
Yeah, thank you.
No, you see, it's an anthropomorphic expression. Oh, right. What does anthropomorphic mean?
We attribute.
It's
We
reversing
connect.
creation and
Wait, wait.
union, that's the point.
We attribute an arm to him, which basically means an illusion or a fantasy. He doesn't really have an arm.
First,
Yeah.
but really
So, when the Rambam says it's a moshul, he's telling you something very different. He's saying, of course it's true, but it's a moshul. He's not saying it's not true. If Torah says he has an arm, then he has an arm. Can't say it's not true. But it's a moshul. What does a moshul mean? I'm trying to explain something very important, and I'm giving you a moshul to help you understand it. So when the Torah says God has an arm and it's only a moshul, so what am I understanding?
It's more important.
Symbolic.
If you have a moshul, there has to be a nimshul. Right? This is an analogy. To what? To a non-existent arm? Then it's not a moshul. It's a lie. Let's make believe he has an arm. That'll help you understand. Understand what? That he doesn't have an arm? It's total confusion.
Well, our interpretation of what an arm is.
Exactly.
is different
Yes.
than,
But I'll tell you a big part of the problem. He has an arm, he doesn't have an arm, who cares? But this whole concept also applies to his anger. When it says he got angry, it doesn't get angry. Wow, now we're on dangerous ground. So he doesn't really get angry. So when you do a mitzvah, he doesn't really get pleasure. So when you say he wants you to keep Shabbos, he doesn't really want. You say he needs the world to become a did, but he doesn't really need. Now all of a sudden we have a true nothing. He really is nothing. He doesn't want, he doesn't need, he doesn't care, he doesn't get angry, he doesn't get pleasure, doesn't. Well, what are we left with here? It's all a muscle.
I think if the physical is a muscle, then also the emotional part. Either you accept everything or nothing.
Right. So if the arm is a little too human to attribute to him, so isn't anger? Oh, worse.
It says, "B'tzelem Elokim Aseh Adam."
Yeah.
So isn't that like?
Yep.
Is that also martial?
No.
Right.
No.
No, yes,
Torah, it's
yes,
for real.
yes. But a tselem is a muscle. No?
Then
It's an
everything's
image.
martial. Then we're also. Then we go back to square one.
Do we exist?
And like, let's start
No,
this
no,
house
no,
all
no.
over again.
No. Oh, hang on. If we can't attribute human features, he knows everything? He knows? Come on, that's human. God is smart? You can't say he's smart, that's human. God is kind? No, kindness is a human trait. You can't say he's kind. So he's not kind, he's not smart, he doesn't care, he doesn't need, he doesn't want. What do we have? An Avodah Zarah? Like, they have eyes that don't see, ears that don't hear? Is that what we just did that to the Eibishter? What does it mean, a mushal? The question is, who is the mushal and who is the nimshal? So we work like that. I have an arm. You want to understand God? Imagine he has an arm. So he's the mushal. The truth is the opposite. God has an arm. You want to understand what his arm is? Look at a human being. 2 arms, one on the right side, one on the left side. You see? God has a right arm and a left arm. You're the mushal. He's the nimshal. We were created in his image. In other words, we're the poor copy of the real thing. So what does it mean it's a mushal? We are the mushal. So when you say arm or mouth concerning the Eibishter, you think of your mouth, but that's just a mushal. A real mouth is quite different than yours, but there is some similarity that gives you a little bit of an insight into what his mouth might possibly be like, but don't think it's like your mouth.
Well, his mouth creates.
Exactly.
Our mouth also creates. We just don't see it. Like, I think yesterday's Hayom says we have to be careful what we say because it creates. We just don't see the creations. No?
Not the literal meaning.
Same way Hashem
You know,
does
when the
it.
Chassid said, "I'm going to kill you," and then
Yeah.
the Baal Shem Tov, so it happens. We just don't see how,
Yeah.
in which sphere.
Yeah,
which
but
world.
it happens doesn't mean it was created, because created means out of nothing.
Okay.
Whereas this guy tearing the other guy apart,
So, like you said, we're like the very minuscule version.
right. So, Eibishter has a real arm, literal arm, actual arm. Really? A real arm? An actual arm? You mean like mine? No. Yours is not real. Don't forget who is the mushal and who is the nimshal. So when the Torah says arm, and you're told, don't take it literally. Oh, be careful. Don't take it physically. Don't think his arm is physical. Why not?
So it's beginning and an end.
Because a physical arm is not a real arm. Just like a doll's arm is not a real arm, your arm is not any more real. It's just a physical thing. The Eibishter's arm is a real arm. So why do we have a thing called an arm? Because we're created in his image, and he really has an arm. Oh, ran away. God is a parable maker. He's master of both infinity and finiteness. What is a parable? A mushal. Yep. When a teacher gives a mushal, what is the purpose? Why do you need a mushal? You have a concept that is very deep. The student is not going to understand it. Like, for example, if you take more than you can handle, you'll end up with nothing. Right? It's a profound concept. You think you're getting a lot, but if it's more than you can handle, not only you're going to end up with less, you'll end up with nothing. Let me give you a mushal. A fox broke into a vineyard because he was hungry. And he squeezed through the crack in the wall and got into the vineyard and ate and ate and ate until he wasn't hungry anymore. But then he couldn't fit through the crack to get out. So he had to sit and fast until he lost all that weight, and then he could get out through the crack. When he got out, he realized he had gained nothing because he ate too much. Now, the kids go home from class, and the mother says, "What did you learn in class today?" That foxes shouldn't eat too much grapes. The mother calls up the principal and says, I'm paying $10,000 for an education for my kid, and you told him that a fox shouldn't eat grapes? And the teacher says, I told him foxes shouldn't eat grapes? Why were we talking about foxes? I'm not talking about foxes. To the teacher, what, were we talking about foxes? We were talking about taking more than you need. In other words, we were talking about a moral concept. Oh, you mean the mushal? Oh, to him, what fox? There's no fox. Wasn't the story about a fox? What story? To him, the mushal didn't conceal anything. To the child, because he couldn't handle the abstract concept of taking more than you need, so the mushal is supposed to help him understand it. How does it help? By concealing the profound meaning of make it sound like simple. But this kid missed the whole point. The mushal didn't work for him. He thinks there are foxes that eat too much. In the same way, God creates the world, and the world is a mushal. Our arm is a mushal for him, our speech is a mushal for him, the world, even a stone is a mushal. But sometimes we don't get it. We think that's it. There's a fox and it eats and grapes and that's it. And you shouldn't eat too many grapes if you're a fox. We missed the whole nimshal. But suppose we're smart enough, we do get the point. But we're getting it in a reduced strength, diluted a little bit. Not so abstract, it's a fox, and yeah, you know, fox got fat, we understand these things. Have to diet, lose weight, yeah, okay, fine, we get it. But what's the point? The point is, don't try to have more than you need because you'll end up with nothing. So don't be greedy. To the teacher, did the mushal diminish or hide the point? Of course not. That's why he used it as a mushal, because in the mushal he sees the whole point. So when God creates the world and restricts our view of him because we can't handle the whole picture. He gives us a mashal. So all we see is the mashal. But is that true of him? That's why you get two perspectives. The Eibishter says, here's a mashal. He means, here's the nimshal. We see, oh, a mashal, okay. Now we have a mashal. A good one, and we get the point. But the point comes out of the mashal, so it's limited. On the other hand, what's a good mashal? Sometimes you give an example and it's the wrong example. It distracts from the point instead of leading to the point. Remember that classical story that two philosophers were arguing about first nature versus second nature. What's stronger? So they made an experiment. They trained the cat to deliver food from the kitchen to the dining room. That was second nature, and they were really well trained. But the other philosopher, who believed that first nature is stronger, brought a mouse to the experiment. And as the cat was bringing the food, he released the mouse. The cat dropped whatever it got and chased the mouse. So the point was that first nature is stronger than second nature. So this professor was delivering this lecture, and at the end of the lecture, the guy raises his hand and he says, "So did he catch the mouse?" The professor said, "Did he catch the mouse?" Huh? It was just a mashal. But the mashal distracted the students. When is it a good mashal? Not only when the student gets the point in a reduced fashion. A good mashal means 20 years from now, when you think about that mashal, you're going to realize that it contains the entire, it's not a reduced version. It's like a time release capsule. It's all there. It's just coming slowly. So for a while you think, oh, okay, I get the point, don't be greedy. But then you say, what? Why did he use a fox as an example? Oh, because the fox is cunning. So now, what makes you become greedy? Because you think you're smart. You see, now more and more of the nimshal is coming out from the details of the mashal, if it's a proper mashal. So there was a Maggid, famous Maggid, who had a mashal for everything. And it was really brilliant and entertaining. And the Rebbe Rashab said that only 2 out of his hundreds of mashalim, he got it right. The other mashalim, they're not. You can't just make up a story and say it's a mashal. It has to be thoughtful, and it has to really contain everything the teacher is trying to say, but in time release fashion. So if 30 years from now you don't realize the deeper and you don't get more information out of the mashal, then it wasn't really a good mashal. So the world being created as a mashal is on the one hand a limited version, so you can handle it, and on the other hand, it has the whole Eibishter. It's all there. So in the end, this mashal will become the nimshal. It won't remain a limited version. We will not forever be in the image of God. We will become godly. Because in the mashal, there is the entire nimshal.
Why didn't you say we'll become God?
Probably not.
Why did you do that?
That's fine.
What does that mean?
The oneness of the Creator and His creation will be complete.
So the whole Torah is a mashal for Hashem.
The whole Torah or the whole world?
The whole world. But Torah also comes in a time release capsule. So at first we saw only the commandments. Then we found out a little bit more about the Eibishter. And as time went on, Torah revealed more and more. The same Torah. But now we find the Medrash in the Torah. Then we found the Kabbalah within the Torah. Then we found the Hasidus within the Torah. So the Torah's mashal is unfolding and blossoming as we go along until it will become Hashem Echad U'Shmai Echad.
Which is what we're doing here, unfolding more from reality and from Torah.
And the same is true with a marriage. A marriage is also a time release capsule. At first, you're impressed with this, with that. Then you get a little closer to the person whose character you're impressed with. But you're moving past the character to the person himself. And eventually, you literally become one.